Good morning, everyone. Welcome to your final assignment for eDesign 100S for spring semester of 2020. This assignment will cover Chapter 12 and Chapter 14. We are skipping over Chapter 13 that deals with sheet metal. If you are interested in that, obviously you are welcome to work through it on your own. So this video will only cover Chapter 12, and that is some advanced 3D methods for creating things in SolidWorks. So we will create the dryer housing from Chapter 12 in this video. So we're going to start out with a new part, and I do want it in English standard. I'm going to create that, and I'm going to go over to my model tree over here. I'm going to turn on the visibility of the XY plane, and I want all of my axes visible, as well as the center point. I'm going to create a new sketch on the XY plane. I'm going to start with a circle at the origin as my center point, and as you can see on page 12-7, we want our arc to have a radius of 2 inches, so I'm going to start out by already making my diameter of the circle 4 inches so that I don't have to redefine that. Then I'm going to start some lines. I will start at the center point here, and again I have Inventor set up to enter dimensions as I go, so I can enter 1.5 inches up as my dimension here, and then connect it to the arc, and I'm going to create a line again, center to the arc. If you don't have Inventor set up to enter your dimensions like that, you can always use the dimensioning command and just add this dimension. That should be the only one that you need besides the diameter of the circle. Then I'm going to use the trim to remove the outside part. You can see that we're fully constrained still, which is good. And I'm going to fill it, and I want a 0.25, a 1/4 inch fillet, and I'm going to put it between the top and the arc. When I zoom out, you can barely see that that is there, but when I finish my sketch, and we're going to revolve this, we'll do a full revolve, and we'll choose this as our axis. You can see that fillet a little better once it's a 3D image. Now I'm going to go into my view and change from visual style of shaded to wireframe so that I can see what I'm doing a little better. Go back to 3D model. We're going to create several offset work planes. We have done this before. We're just going to do the same thing that we did before. Offset from a plane. I'm going to select the XY plane as my start, and we're going to make 3 work planes. So one at 2.5 inches. I'm going to make another at 3.5 inches, and our third at 4.25 inches. So now when I zoom out, you can see all of those work planes. We are using these to create a lofted feature, which will have several different profiles, and then basically mesh those profiles together to create something for us. Now I'm going to select the XY plane first and start a 2D sketch there, and it automatically, if you select the plane first, will make a sketch on that plane for you. And start with a rectangle from the center point, and so instead of entering my dimensions like I did before, if you don't have that set up, I'll show you how you would do this. It's going to be the same that you've probably done several times in the past, but you would go to your dimension and enter your dimensions this way. So our first rectangle we want to be 1.5 inches wide and half an inch tall. And then we also want to fillet the top corners at 1/4 inch. We've already got a 1/4 inch fillet there, so that's good. You can either click the corner or the top and the side. Either one will get you a fillet of that corner. That sketch is done, so I finish it, and I'm going to click on my first work plane and start a sketch there. Now, I do have it again going to turn and face my sketch when I start it, but if you want to, you can still sketch in the isometric view. I am going to project some geometry. I want to project the curve here. So if you're in the isometric view, it's very easy to select that curve. If you are turned to face it, it's going to default to trying to select the entire bottom of your piece. So what you can do if you're in this situation is right click and click select other, and then you have a drop down list, and as you hover over those, it will highlight the selection in red. So I have the curve highlighted in red. That's what I want to project. So I'm going to click that, and you see it turned yellow to show that it has projected that into my sketch. Now I'm going to create a rectangle starting at the bottom of that curve. And this rectangle, I want it to be a little bit narrower, so it's going to be 1.4 inches wide, and it's still going to be half an inch high. And I'm going to hit F6 again to go to isometric view. It is a little easier in that case to see the rectangle that I'm working on as opposed to the one that I did previously. Now I'm going to fillet the corners again, and it is still set to a 1/4 inch fillet, which is good. That's still what I want. We'll finish that. I'm going to select my work plane number 2, start a sketch on that one, and I'm going to project the bottom of this. You can see that line has been projected into my sketch because this is the sketch I'm working on now. Rectangle, start at that bottom corner again. This one we want to be 1.2 inches wide by, again, half an inch tall. And we'll fillet the top corners. Finish. And finally, one last time on work plane 3, we'll start a sketch, and this rectangle is going to be slightly wider. We'll have to project our geometry, get that bottom of the curve there, that rectangle, and this one will be a little wider again. This one should be 1.35 wide and still half an inch tall, with fillets on the top corners. So we'll finish that. Now you can see that I've got all of those different profiles, and I will use the loft feature to create the handle of my dryer housing. So I want these sections. I'm going to click to add sections, and I'm going to start with my first sketch and just click each one in order, and you can see it's giving you a preview of what it's going to look like. So the loft just kind of creates an average change between each profile. So it got slightly narrower, and then wider again. I'll click OK. Okay, and you can see it's created that handle feature. And because this is a solid feature, you can't really see what's going on inside it because they just combine together. So anything from here to this plane doesn't really matter until it's outside of that original revolve that we created. Now we're going to create the blower tube part. So we'll start a sketch on the YZ plane. And you can see that turned kind of opposite to what you're seeing on page 1217. So I'm going to shift and middle click to rotate that a bit so that it looks more like what we were seeing. I'm going to then click the left view on my view cube. And I want to create kind of a half circle here. So I'm going to start with a line, and I'm not putting it anywhere near where I want it to end up, but that's fine. As long as it is horizontal here. Then I'm going to create a circle at the center point to the outside. And I'm going to use the trim again to take the bottom off of that. I'll use my dimension to make this 0.75, and that will change the size both of the circle and of the line since they are sized together. And then I'm going to I'm still in the dimension command. I'm going to choose the center point of the circle and the origin. Give it a vertical distance of 0. And then origin and the center point of the circle and a horizontal distance of 1.125. And now we've got everything we need. Finish that sketch. I am going to extrude it. It's going the opposite direction that I want right now, so I can change it to direction 2. Change my distance to 5.5 inches. Now we've got the blower nozzle of our hair dryer. I'm going to take the planes that I don't need to see anymore and turn off their visibility, just so that my work area is a little less cluttered up. That's just my own personal choice. You don't have to do that. It's up to you. Now I'm going to change my view, visual style, back to shaded. And we are going to use a 3-dimensional fillet to make smooth transitions here and make this smooth, make smooth transition over here. So go to 3D model, fillet, and we want this to be 0.15 inches radius, and I'm going to select the edges that I want. So I want it here, I want it here. I'm going to shift middle mouse to rotate, and I want it here. Apply, and my fillets are done. So you can see those now. Then we're going to create a shell. A shell basically hollows out a solid and makes exactly what it sounds like. It makes a shell. So I'm going to rotate this so that I can see the bottom and find the shell command up here. My shell thickness to be 0.125, and then I want to get rid of the bottom part. And I also want to get rid of this part here so that we can blow air through it. And you can see a preview of what that's going to do. It looks good. I'll hit OK. And you can see what it did. Made a nice shell. Now we're going to create a pattern. And we're going to do a pattern cut to make the rectangular holes in the top here. So I'm going to start out with a sketch on the top surface, make a rectangle. Its size should be 1/2 inch by 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to dimension it from the origin to the top right corner. And I can do that horizontally at 1.45. And I can use the same 2 points to do it vertically at 1.17. Now I've got my rectangle placed where I want it. It is sized like I want it, fully constrained. I'll finish that sketch. And I'm going to select Sketch 7, Extrude, and I want a cut, and I want it to be only 0.13 inches. That will allow it to cut all the way through that 1/4 inch of shell that we have, but it won't go much deeper than that, so it won't go all the way through in any areas that are not just the flat top surface. So I'm going to hit OK. You can barely even see that cut exists. It's just kind of cut a little notch out of here, but that's fine. We're going to create a pattern now, a rectangular pattern. I'm going to select Extrusion 2 as the feature. And then for directions, I'll choose direction 1. I want to go along this edge. You can see an arrow has been created here showing the direction that it wants to go is left. That's good. That's the direction I want. If we wanted to go right, I could flip the direction. I'll change this. I'm going to have the number of times that it's repeated in that direction to be 5, and the spacing between them to be 0.6 inches. And then our second direction, we'll use this edge. Again, it's going the direction we want, in the positive Z direction. We want this to be 10. It's going to give us a warning. I'm okay with that. And we want this to be 1/4 inch in between. So you can see kind of where that pattern will be created. I'm going to click OK. Now we've got our cuts in the top. So if we turn to face the top, you can see that it has cut all the way through wherever the surface is flat, but then anywhere that it has encountered where the direction is changed, it's not cutting all the way through. Finally, we're going to create a sweep feature. A sweep basically takes a profile and either cuts or creates model. You can either create things or you can cut things away with a sweep. It would take a profile and move it along a rail. So the first thing I want is the rails that I want to move my cut along. I'm going to shift middle click to rotate so I can see the bottom of my piece, and then I'll click bottom. Doesn't really matter what direction it is right now. I'm going to start a sketch on that bottom surface, and I'm just going to use projections for the sketch. So I only want the outside edges of my model, everywhere except I don't need anything on this edge right here. So this is the edge of the blower. Basically, I want everything that goes around the outside of that edge. So I'm going to project, and I'm just going to select all the outside edges. Make sure when you get to your camphor here that you select that tiny little edge, because it's hard to see it, but you do want that included so that you make a full loop all the way around. So every time you come to somewhere that has a corner, make sure you select that little corner as well. And get it all the way around. And you can see that it's been selected when it turns yellow. So now I've got that all the way around. I can finish that sketch. And now I want to make the sketch of the rectangle that I'm going to use to cut. So I'm going to change my view so that it looks like what we're seeing in the book. I create a sketch on this surface. And that is kind of the front face of that blower. I'm going to create a rectangle, and it's going to be fairly small. I want it to be 0.0625 by 0.125. And then I'm going to dimension it so that this edge is right on that axis, 0, and my top corner here and top corner of this guy which I'm going to have to project this. So I just use those corners, make those 0. So now I've got my cutting feature where I want it. I'll finish that. Now I will use the sweep command and tell it that I want it to cut. The type is set to path, which is good. The profile, we're going to select profile and choose that rectangle that we just made. You might have to rotate around a little bit to get it. It really doesn't want to. There we go. So you can see the profile is selected because it's highlighted in blue. And path, I choose that yellow path that we created, sweep path. Now it's showing you what it's going to do. It's going to cut all the way around that path using that rectangle. Okay. And that's what we wanted. That looks good. So that is everything that you need to know from Chapter 12. Next video we'll move on to Chapter 14.